Hello all. So this video we'll talk about fractions. We'll be talking about regular fractions, improper fractions, mixed fractions, adding and subtracting fractions, multiplying and dividing fractions. Alright, so let's start with a fraction. Let's start with 3/4. There's two parts to the fraction. The top, which is known as the numerator, and the bottom, which is known as the denominator. Right? In a proper fraction, the numerator is always smaller than the denominator. All right. So this is saying that we have 3 of the 4 parts of the whole, if you want to look at it that way. This is a normal fraction. An improper fraction, okay, has the numerator larger than the denominator. So this is known as an improper fraction. And a mixed fraction, okay, has a number out front, or mixed number you might see it called, all right, like so. So our job is to be able to relate to all of these. Well, really we want to be able to change an improper fraction to a mixed fraction. So let's take another example, okay, and let's do a number like well, let's do this one first. Let's take a proper fraction and turn it into a decimal. Okay, if we're going to turn it into a decimal, all right, what you do is you divide the denominator into the numerator. So we would take 4 and we would divide it into 3. Now 4 doesn't go into 3, so we put a 0 there. 0 times 4 is 0, and if we're following the rules for the first video, we'd have a 3 there and we'd bring down the next number. Well, there's no number there, but it's assumed that it's 3.0 when it's written that way. So we bring the decimal up and we bring the 0 down. Now 4 has to go into 30. 4 goes into 37 times. Okay, 7 times 4 is 28. 2 left over. 4 can't go into 2. We put another 0, bring it down, and we continue that until we have nothing left. 4 times 5 is 20, and therefore 3/4 as a decimal is 0.75. Now we'll talk about decimals later on in a separate video of how to get our decimals back to fractions. Well, how about our improper fraction? These are equal to one another over here. And how is that so? Well, we do the same exact thing. Okay, so we are going to divide the bottom into the top. 3, all right, divided by 4. 3 goes into 4 once. 1 times 3 is 3 minus 1. Now, if we don't want it as a decimal and we want it as a mixed number, we write this number out front, 1. We put our remainder over our denominator, 1 1/3. Let's do another one. Let's say we had 16 fifths. That's improper. Numerator is bigger than the denominator. So we take 5 goes into 16 how many times? So 5 goes into 16 3 times. 5. All right, divided by 16 3 times. 3 times 5 is 15 with 1 left over. You put the remainder up here, keep the denominator, and it's 3 1/5. So that's how, all right, you take an improper fraction and get a mixed number. What if I wanted to go in reverse? What if I wanted a mixed number and I wanted to turn it into an improper fraction? All right, very easily. Let's do 3 2/3. All right. Multiply these together. Then take your answer from there and add that. So 3 times 3 is 9, plus 2 is 11, and we're left with 11/3. This will get you your numerator. The denominator stays the same. If we worked it back, 3 goes into 3 3 times with 2 left over. Okay, let's do another one. 5 1/4. 4 times 5 is 20, plus 1, 21/4. Okay. So that's how to go from a mixed number to an improper fraction. Now, let's talk about adding and subtracting our fractions. First, we'll talk about adding and subtracting proper and improper fractions. We could talk about mixed fractions too, but let's talk about, I want to add 3/4, and I want to add it to 1/2. Now, what people want to do is just add everything together and go, well, that is 4/6. That's not right. Okay? You can't do that. What you have to do is find your least common denominator, or also known as LCD. You got to find a number that both of these go into evenly. Both your denominators go into evenly. So if you have to write down your factors or your multiples of each denominator, go right ahead. When in doubt, if you don't see it right away, if you take these numbers and multiply them together, that'll give you a least common denominator. Okay, so I know off the top of my head it's 4. All right, we could see that. The 2 goes into 4. All right, so what you do here is you got to change this fraction. Well, 4 goes into 4 once, times that 3. All right. So what you do is this. 2 goes into your new denominator how many times? Multiplied by your top numerator. So 2 goes into 4 2 times. 2 times 1 is 2. Now, when you go to add them up, okay, I get 5/4. You add across here, you keep the LCD. Now, this is an improper fraction. We don't like to keep them as improper fractions. So, what do? Turn it into a mixed number. 4 goes into 5 once, 1 left over, 1 and 1/4. You could write that as a decimal if you want. Change this fraction to a decimal like we looked at in the last one. What if you didn't know 4? What if you did the rule I said and you changed this to an 8? 4 times 2 is 8. How would that change our answer? We should get the same answer if we did everything right. 4 goes into 8 twice. 2 times 3 is 6. So 6/8 is the same thing as 3/4. 2 goes into 8 4 times. 4 times 1 is 4. I end up with 10/8. Okay? Now, here's the thing about fractions. We have to reduce them. Get them into their smallest factors possible. So is there a number that goes into both 10 and 8? Up here, there's no number besides 1 that goes into 5 and 4 both. Here, 2 does. 2 goes into 10 5 times, and this is known as reducing. 8 goes into, or 4 goes into, or 2 goes into 8, I should say, 4 times, and we're left with that 5/4, or 1 and 1/4. Let's do another one. Okay. Let's do 3/6 plus 2/9, something like that. Okay, we need our least common denominator. Well, there's 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, 36. 36 is probably going to be it. So 6 goes into 36. So here's what I'm doing. 6 goes into the new one 6 times the top. So 18/36. And the way you could check yourself is reduce it. Reduce it by 6. 6 goes into 18 3. 6 goes into 36 6 times 3/6. Now 3/6 could be reduced further, right? By 3, 1/2. But we'll stick with the 3/6. 9 goes into 36 4 times. 4 times 2 is 8. Add them up. Keep the 36. 8 and 18, all right, is 26. So I have 26/36 as my answer. Okay. Now, do I leave it like that, or can I reduce it? Well, this number is even, that number is even, so I know at least 2 goes into it. 2 goes into 26 13 times. 2 goes into 36 18 times. So my answer is really 13/18. Always check to see if you can reduce. And it's the same principle for division. if I want to do, let's say, 2/5 minus 1/8. Okay. The least common multiple, we'll do it real quick. 8 times 5 is 40. And then we'll worry about reducing if we have to later. So 40 goes into 5. 5 goes into 40 8 times 2, 16. 8 goes into 45 times. So I'm left with 16 minus 5, which is 11. And the 40 stays the same. And we're left with 11/40ths. Now, if it's a longer problem, your order of operations, which we talked about in the first chapter, goes into play. You do parentheses, you do things like that. How about multiplying? Let's do multiplying now. Well, let's do this. While we're on adding and subtracting, what if I had a mixed number? 3 1/2 plus 4 1/3. I wanted to add those together. Well, you could do it two ways. You could add the big numbers, the whole numbers together, make that a 7. Then come over here and find your least common denominator, which is going to be 6 and 6. And that'll be 2 6 and 3 6. So I'd have 7 5/6. That's one way of doing it. Another way is to turn these into mixed the mixed numbers into improper, where I'm left with 7/2 plus 13/3. Okay. This times this plus this times this plus this. Find your least common denominator again. 6 and 6. 26/6, 21/6. Okay. Add them together. 47/6. 6 goes into 47 7 times, which is 42. Okay. So I'd have 6 divided by 40, not square, divided by 47. Goes in 7 times, which is 42. 5 left over, so I'm left with 7 5/6. So either way works with mixed numbers in both multiplication and subtraction. I prefer turning them into improper. It's just my little thing, but you could do it either way. All right, multiplying and dividing. Let's do multiplication first. 3/4 times 1/2. No need for LCDs here. You don't need a least common denominator. And here, we actually do change the denominator. You need to actually multiply across and multiply across. So 3 times 1, 3. 4 times 2, 8. 6/7 times 2/5. 12/35. But what if I had a mixed number? What if it was 3 1/4 times 3/5? How would I do it? Me personally, I'm going to change this. I'm going to do 4 times 3 plus 1. I'm going to make that 13/4 times 3/5 and do the multiplication. 13 times 3 is 39. 5 times 4 is 20. And I'm going to end up with, now I do my division. 20 goes into 39 once with 19 left over. And I get an answer like that. That's the way you should do it. If you have a mixed number, or even two mixed numbers, turn them into improper fractions. Well, what about division? Okay, here we go. If I am dividing fractions, 3/4 divided by 5/7. First step, there's a couple steps. Change your division to a multiplication. And get the reciprocal of the second digit. So it's 3/4 times 7/5. And you end up with 21 over 20, or 1 1/20. We'll do another one. 2/9 divided by 1/3. So in adding and subtracting, you find your least common denominator and you keep that denominator. In multiplication and division, that doesn't exist. All right, you change it to multiplying. Flip this around, so you have 2/9 times 3 over 1. Now, depending on how you learned, you could do the problem, okay, and go, all right, I have 6/9, and then reduce it. The common multiple is 3, so 2/3. Or if you learned it the other way, where you say, okay, this could cancel out this could cancel out that, so we say this is 1, this is 3, and you end up with your 2/3 that way. Whichever way you are comfortable with will get you your right answer. Well, what if I had, 3½ divided by 2 2/3? Here, what I like to do is get them into improper fractions. 2 times 3 plus 1, 7/2, divided by 3 times 2 is 6, 8/3. Multiply and flip. 7/2 times 3/8. 21/16, or 1 5/16. You should never leave it as an improper fraction unless they ask you to do it as an improper fraction. All right, well, what if I had a problem like this then, Mr. Koval? Well, if I had a board that just did that. All right. Here's what we could do. If we had a problem that had something like 3/4 minus 1/2 times 2/3, what do we do? Follow your order of operations. First I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to subtract. So I got 3/4 minus, I got 1/2 times 2/3, all right, which is going to be, this becomes a 1, that becomes a 1 if you want to do it that way. 1/3. Okay. What do I have to do now? I have to find my least common denominator, which is 12. 4 goes into 12 3 times. That'll be 9/12 minus 4/12, and our answer is 5/12. So if there's multiple steps, follow your order of operations. Okay. So that does it for fractions. I'll have the worksheets are online, and if you have any questions, feel free to email me.